A lot of small Australian businesses that sell stuff to Americans, they could be in big trouble. Donald Trump said from Friday he's going to be scrapping the rule that businesses wouldn't have to pay tariffs when they sent parcels with goods worth under $800 US. And today Australia Post said, well, it's immediately going to suspend postal deliveries to the US to work out how to deal with that, because unlike commercial freight companies, it can't collect taxes or tariffs. Joining me is Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood. Ross Greenwood, thank you for your time. How bad is this temporary ban on sending small packages to America? Bad for customers, or maybe it's just bad for Australia Post?
Well, bad for Australia Post, but also bad for small businesses that right now send goods to the United States which are valued under $800 US. Now, the change comes in from this Friday and effectively means that in the past, if your goods were basically under $800 US, they entered the United States without any tariffs whatsoever. But this is the so-called de minimis level. The de minimis is simply just saying that's the minimum level under which no tariffs were, say, applicable. But then from Friday, every item that goes into the United States will be the subject of tariffs. Now, this is just a nightmare for companies here, small businesses trying to send goods to the United States, because they've got to work out what the tariff is. Now, to be fair, companies like FedEx or DHL, range of others, will have ways in which you can work out those tariffs and therefore apply them when you send the goods. But do bear in mind that's something that the businesses themselves have to do. Australia Post has decided it's actually, for the moment, too hard. They don't have those calculators, and so they've simply stopped the shipping of these small parcels. Now, I'll give you one small example I worked out. Let's say, for example, you were an Australian confectionery maker, and in the past you sent these parcels under $800 US, and they turned up there with no tariffs. Well, now, as you apply, you've got to go through all of the paperwork, and the tariff you've got to hit them with is 10%, which you either have to pay here via your shipper, or you have to organise for the person who picks up the shipment to pay it to the US Customs when it arrives. So in other words, a whole lot more paperwork has been done. And there are all sorts of people in Australia, from the fashion industry to small manufacturers to all sorts, that do this currently. And this just creates more red tape and more of a nightmare for them.
And red tape also costs, so it's not just the tariffs, it's the red tape.
Yeah.
And plus now problems in finding the shipper that's going to send that package for you to the US. It's going to hurt a lot of people. But Ross, that's one thing. I want to talk to you about another threat. And you've done a series of interviews that have really, I think, should be headlines around Australia recently, with leaders of some of our very biggest energy companies in particular. These interviews should really frighten the government. Top gas and mining companies telling you that Australia is no longer a good place for business because of green tape, black tape, high power prices, saying they are now investing more overseas instead of investing in projects here. Here are some of the people you've talked to.
Given the global competitive dynamics that we talked about earlier, there are likely other places where you're going to see more trains added before we would add them in Western Australia or on the East Coast.
The last $30 billion US in material investments we've made have been elsewhere. And it's a shame, somewhere between difficult and impossible to develop gas resources.
We're going to be competing against the building of smelters elsewhere that happens much more quickly, much more cheaply, where energy costs, and smelting is an energy-intensive industry, are lower elsewhere.
Ross, that from some of our very, very biggest companies is frightening. It's extraordinary. What should it tell us?
It should tell us that Australia is not competitive. This is the bottom line of it. And really, all of the social welfare reforms that the Albanese government has embarked upon, and previous governments as well, they're all well and good when you're in a first world nation. But the reality is that you need to have economic growth to pay for those things. So what happens is, if businesses, because Australia is uncompetitive, pick up their capital and their investments and go elsewhere, then ultimately we lose the economic growth that pays for all of those social reforms. Now, if we want to have first world healthcare, we want first world education, we want first world childcare, NDIS, aged care, all those things cost. And you can't basically have the money coming from thin air. That's the way in which you go down a very slippery path to the third world. That's not where Australia wants to be. So Australia has got to embrace these companies, make ourselves more competitive. We are not competitive on wages. We are not competitive on energy prices. We are not competitive on our taxes in this country. And yet it seems that from the Economic Roundtable last week, one of the answers was, why don't we raise taxes and make the wealthy pay for everything? Well, that doesn't work because the biggest companies in the world have choice. We are not the only place where there is copper or iron ore or gas. That's actually all around the world. And so these companies have choices to where they develop. And if we don't have the right economic settings here in Australia, then those companies take the investment, take the jobs, take the future taxes somewhere else. And that is not good for Australia.
And I would add to those three factors you mentioned, the re-regulation of the workplace too, that has really hurt some companies in terms of their ability to be flexible in their working arrangements. And I just think that, you know, so much of these hurdles are caused by ideological bloody-mindedness, really. And I don't know, we've just got to get out of it, but the government seems to have no appetite for rowing it back. Ross Greenwood, thank you so much for your time.
Quite okay.